Hi everyone, Stepan here. Sorry about not recording for a long time, but I've been busy with mostly chess things, which is good. And I've actually played the chess game after a bit more than 5 months, a bit more than 6 months. Okay, so let me give you the context of all the things that have been going on. So the first thing is, I was supposed to play the first Croatian league, which should have started 2 days from now. So when I got the news, I got really excited, because that means I would play very strong players. Many foreign grandmasters play in the first Croatian league, and our first team is very strong. Usually has foreign players as well, but due to the current situation, they couldn't come. So I started preparing for that. Then it got cancelled. Then they said it would be played again, so I locked myself in and started preparing. Didn't record, didn't work, didn't go online. Then it got cancelled again. So then I was devastated. But the fourth Croatian league, which I play every year, which got cancelled 3 times during this summer, actually resumed, and we played a game this Sunday. And here's the funny thing. When the league got cancelled for the 3rd time, they put up a vote and said how many clubs want to continue the league, how many clubs want to play. There are 14 teams, I'm going to say, in the league. And then only 4 teams, only 4 clubs, my club being one of them, said they would play. After the 2 clubs that voted yes realized it was only 4 teams, they said they wouldn't play after all. So it was only my club and another club. And then we got paired for the only match this season, and whoever wins the match is going to be playing in the 3rd Croatian league next season. So it was kind of important, but then we found out that both teams would advance anyway, simply because there's a rule that the 2 top teams in every league advance to the higher league. So it's been complicated 10 days. I've been preparing and I've been training, haven't been working at all, haven't been doing anything but chess. So here's the game. I was preparing for a completely different opponent. Unfortunately, he didn't play, so all my prep went out the window. I had the black pieces. My opponent played pawn to c4. Now I have briefly looked at his games, and he usually plays setups with knight c3 and g3. So I was kind of prepared for that, but I hadn't prepared for him specifically in detail. So I played c6, which I normally don't play anymore. I don't play the Caro-Kann anymore. And this is an invitation either to the Panov Caro-Kann, to the semi-Slav, or to the accelerated Panov, or to a normal Slav defense, depending on what he does. So if he plays d4, I play d5. My opponent played e4. We have the accelerated Panov. And now after d5, e takes d, c takes d, he could play d4 going into the Panov Caro-Kann, or he could take going into the accelerated Panov. And here I got worried, not because I don't know this opening, but because I haven't worked on it in about 2 years. And I knew what I was doing, but only sort of. So obviously I don't want to take with the queen because he has knight c3 with tempo, so I play knight f6. Here he plays knight c3, which is correct. I take, which is correct. He plays d4. He doesn't want to take on d5 now because that would activate my queen. And in this position, this was sort of the first critical point for me, because I knew that bishop f5 is the correct move. What I didn't know was how to survive all the sharp variations which branch out from bishop f5. So obviously if I play bishop f5, I can play pawn to e6 without blocking in my bishop. However, after bishop b5, knight c6, knight f3, e6, knight e5, rook c8, there is a ton of pressure on this diagonal and on the c6 square. Since my bishop has gone outside of the pawn chain, I don't have bishop d7 anymore. So this is a position I sort of knew. And after knight b4, I knew that this was a theoretical position in which black is supposed to be okay, in some positions even winning. The problem is I had no idea whether I was winning or lost, because I couldn't remember everything. When I analyzed the game, I realized the variation goes queen a7, and after knight c2, king g1, king f1, excuse me, rook to c7, defending the b7 pawn, the position is equal. But there would be no way to know that during the game. Also, if after d4 I play bishop f5, he doesn't have to play bishop b5. He can play queen b3, he can play knight f3, and there are a ton of variations. So I knew that bishop f5 was the best move, but I played e6 instead, because I knew that I wouldn't lose to a simple blunder. And those variations really do get very sharp. He plays knight f3, I played knight c6, which is correct. And here he played bishop d3 and offered the draw. Now my opponent was slightly higher rated than me, and he probably wanted to draw the game quickly. He wanted I think their team wanted to draw our team, because then both teams advance and the match is not important. But I declined the draw because I hadn't played chess in 6 months, and because bishop d3 is a weird move. So here's the thing, he wants to play queen c2, put pressure on h7. The problem is I have knight b4 if he does that. So he will have to play a3 at some point. Normally he wants his bishop on b5 when he still has the option of knight e5 and when I haven't developed yet. So bishop d3 doesn't make much sense. I played bishop e7, preparing to castle. Now here's what I want to do. I want to play g6 eventually when he plays queen c2. I want to play bishop f6. And then I want to play a6, b5, bishop b7, rook c8. And I've played positions like this a million times. In some variations of the Panov, you play that to activate your bishop, and your bishop is not stuck behind the e6 pawn. So I was very happy here. Castles, castles. He plays a3. Okay. And in this position, I played a6, which I actually checked this with an engine later, is the best move. I was really struggling to find a different plan. I thought during the game that that the engine would hate a6, but I don't have a better plan. I don't want to play bishop f6 because he continues rook e1 or something. I don't want to play h6 because he again plays rook e1. And if I'm going to develop my rook and my bishop, I have to play a6, b5. Okay, also I don't want to play bishop f6 because if a6 he could go knight a4, and now I would have to play b6 to defend the c5 square, because if I play b5 he plays knight c5, and my bishop is on f6, remember. So I played a6, which the engine gives us the best option, which I was surprised to see. Here, in this position, he played the move queen c2, which I responded to with g6 because I actually wanted to play g6. I know that g6 is played in many lines of the Caro-Kann in the Panov variation. You simply defend the h7 square and give your opponent no counterplay. Later on, I realized that I could have played f5, and I wasn't really sure how weak my e6 pawn was. So if he, for example, plays rook d1, which makes sense, defending d4 and bishop f6, and something like knight d5 and queen d5. I didn't know if I was going to have issues with this pawn, but I didn't play f5. I played g6, allowing what's a really, scary looking bishop h6, but I had a plan. So rook e8, he plays rook f to d1, which I don't think is a precise move. I think he wants his rook on the e file and on the c file. There isn't enough pressure on the d4 pawn. And I don't think bishop f6 is as scary because he has knight e2. But rook f d1, simply defending d4. Bishop f6, and now he plays bishop e4. And in this position, I thought I was better. Why? Because he has an isolated d4 pawn, which he is never getting rid of. I get to reinforce the d5 square, meaning I never have to recapture with the pawn. I'm defending everything. And next move, I'll play b5. And then I'll play bishop b7. In this position, he continued rook a to c1, and I played b5. And here, okay, I actually know the engine evaluation now. The engine says it's equal, but I think it's much easier to play black. Here, it's hard to suggest a move for white. Knight e5 I don't think works. Bishop g5, I would just take it. He went a bit crazy, and he played the move h4. Now h4 simply doesn't work because he never has h5 without severe consequences. So I wasn't precise 2 moves from now, but I think I could have won the game fairly easily. h4 tries to weaken this pawn chain with the queen and bishop battery, But with my knight on e7, with the d5 square so well protected, and with his loose bishop on h6, that doesn't work. So bishop b7. Okay, and here he played h5. And this position is basically black to play and win, which I realized an hour after the game. I sat down and looked at two positions from the game. Only the one before g6 and this one here. So here I played a very tempting move, a good move, but not the winning move. There's a fairly simple way to win this position. You can pause the video. Okay, the idea is knight takes c3. The bishop is hanging. So firstly, queen takes knight can be discarded because of bishop takes bishop. If bishop takes bishop, then knight takes rook. And if bishop takes rook, knight takes f2. One pawn hanging, second pawn hanging, bishop hanging. If you take my knight, I take your bishop. If you retreat your bishop, I can take on d5, on d4. And it's simply a pawn up with white's pawn structure ruined and too many targets. Okay, so that simply wouldn't work. Instead, okay, yeah, one more thing. If after knight takes c3 he plays pawn takes c3, then I take the bishop, queen takes bishop, and queen to d5. Hanging, the queen has to be traded off. The c3 pawn is very weak. I'm going to play rook c8 and basically win the pawn, and I don't see a good defense to that. I could even take the h5 pawn. Instead of all of that, which was simply winning for black, I played knight f5, which is a very tempting move, attacking the h6 bishop, forcing it to move at one point, and also sometimes threatening to take on h5. Again, knight takes c3 was much cleaner. So here he trades, which I think is correct, and plays bishop f4. Now, I had a couple of options here. The first thing I'd considered was simply playing knight to e7, which I now think is the best move. Because after knight e7, the only real threat he has is h6, but I don't think it works. So for example, after h6, I would play rook c8. The idea of knight e7 is preventing a bunch of trades. So knight e7 would simply reinforce d5 and give me a very good position. The other thing I could do is I could take on h5, and after taking on h5, he would probably trade on f5, and after bishop takes f5, pawn takes f5, wait, queen take, wait, I messed something up. Yeah, okay, I have to take with the queen, excuse me. Okay, if this happens, then queen takes d5, and if he takes on f5, which I was expecting would happen, then takes, and queen takes, and bishop takes f3, and pawn takes f3. I guess black is slightly better, but black could get mated easily with something like king h2 and rook g1, so I didn't want to go for that. Instead of all of that, I played rook c8 at this position, and I was aware that rook c8 led to a major simplification of the position, and my opponent had already offered a draw with bishop d3 10 moves ago, so I knew that he was happy with the draw. I thought the endgame would be slightly better for me, but okay, you will see. So I played rook c8. This basically forces a trade. My opponent suggested that I take the bishop, and after queen takes bishop, now I play rook c8. I wasn't really happy with this position, because he would have moves like g4, and now his pawns seem very scary. So okay, rook c8 I think is okay. And takes, and takes, and rook takes, and rook takes, and bishop takes, and pawn takes, and a bunch of trades. And finally here he played bishop e5. And in this position he offered a draw again. And I had about 50 minutes on the clock, he had about 35. So I was a bit up on the clock, and I just couldn't figure this position out, which is unfortunate, because when I started analyzing the game, I solved it very quickly, and this is much easier to play for black, if not winning. Now the engine says it's about -1, which doesn't seem winning, but the problem is that black doesn't have a good, white doesn't have a good defense against what black is trying to do. So the major thing is in this position is we both have one weakness. The problem for him is that his weakness is on a dark square, and I have a dark squared bishop. His bishop has no targets. So here's the move, bishop e7. After bishop e7, my position is perfect. So what can he do? He can guard the second rank to prevent rook c2, and he can do that with either knight e1 or rook d2. Let's say he plays rook d2. If he plays rook d2, I can simply continue rook c4, or I can continue f6. After f6, if his bishop retreats to h2, then it's a mate in 3. He would have to give up his knight and rook. If it goes to f4, I chase it away again. If it goes to g3, I take. And this should be a much easier game for me to play. If he plays rook d2, then yes, f6. If he plays knight e1, then simply bishop d6. And after bishop d6, knight d6, I have two great squares. Eventually I will have rook to c2, unless he plays knight d3. And then rook c2, rook c1 takes should again be much better for me. This should be simply winning and getting my king into play slowly. It's very hard for white to entangle. And then if he plays g4 after bishop e7, I would simply continue knight d6 or knight h4. And again, a much better position for me. Knight e1, stopping rook d2, and simply f6. And once the bishop retreats, I'm controlling the entire board. So the endgame would have been much better for me. Unfortunately, I accepted the draw, which I know is cowardly and I shouldn't have accepted, especially because this was the first game I played in 6 months and 6 days. So the last game I played was on March 14th. And I should have played on to win, especially because I saw that there was no danger for my king and for my position. But yeah, I have to admit I was stressed. And after the game, I was extremely upset with how rusty I am. So I was trying to calculate variations, but it just wouldn't work. I felt like I'm dreaming that I'm running and I cannot run quickly. Or you dream that you are trying to punch someone or something and then your hand moves really slowly. So I felt powerless, and I think I need games to get back into shape. I don't think training alone helps. You need to play actual games. So yeah, I played a game, which I'm happy about. I didn't win, which I'm unhappy about. But yeah, finally back to training, back to recording. I'm continuing the Dutch tomorrow, and it seems that there may be more chess in the near future, but we will see. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think about the game, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.